So let me start with the facts that you know already. The first is when you say TCS Ninja 2022, when you say that you applied for it, obviously you would know the test pattern. You do know that 5 sections, and it starts with verbal ability. But if you look closer, the thing that you have to keep in your mind is especially the number of questions that you have for verbal aptitude. You have 24 questions and the time duration is 30 minutes. 24 questions on verbal aptitude. The syllabus says you will have questions on reading comprehension, we call it RC. Another thing, you have sentence completion and sentence correction. Predominantly, you could expect questions from these 3 topics, but there are other subtopics which are very well aligned to these 3 topics, and you may get any few questions from them as well. So when you prepare for TCS Ninja, your preparation should be so perfect, so complete, so that it should help you to attain a great score. Keeping that in your mind, if you pay attention on the number of questions and the time that you have, then you will realize it is in this section, it is in the verbal aptitude section, relatively compared to the other sections. Say the 5th section coding, you have 15 minutes for 1 question, and even in programming logic, you have enough time. Whereas in the aptitude segment, particularly in verbal aptitude, the time is pretty much less, I would say, comparatively, compared to the other sections. And there comes the difficulty, because do you think that 30 minutes is sufficient for you to answer 24 questions? If you look closer, you have hardly 60 to 70 seconds for each question. So which means for a verbal aptitude question, based on your prior experience, if you have been into placement training, if you have been into aptitude training and tests, if you have taken tests, then you could easily understand the point which I'm trying to make here. The first thing is, whenever you're on an aptitude question, especially when you're on an verbal aptitude section, the time consumption for each question would be relatively more, because in quants, the questions are short and there is a greater scope for you to use logic. So you would agree with me, whoever has a minimum exposure to aptitude components, whoever has even limited exposure to aptitude training, would agree with me that quantitative aptitude questions or numerical ability questions can be solved quickly, for the very reason the questions are short and you can apply logic. Coming to the verbal aptitude questions, especially when you look at reading comprehension, the question types like reading comprehension, the question types like sentence correction would consume a great deal of time in terms of you understanding the question itself. So it's not that just you read the question, pick a thread and apply it. It won't work that way. And even without limited exposure, even without no exposure, you would agree with me, reading comprehension question, irrespective of the number of questions you have for each passage, it would take certainly more than a minute's time for you to read a passage, and assuming that the passage just carries 1 or 2 questions, it's going to take much time. So all it underlines, all it emphasizes to a great observation that you need a smarter approach. So if you rely on what you know, if you rely on just it's reading comprehension, I'm just gonna read and answer it. Perhaps you may, but certainly you cannot, you won't have enough time to complete all the questions. Having said this, there is another observation that you need to make here. That is, it's not a test which gives you the credit for you answering questions. Rather, it's a test when you say TCS Ninja, and that too is a written test for selection process. It goes without saying that it's not about the number of questions you attempt, it is about the number of questions you answer correctly, right? So verbal aptitude questions there is a very big difference between the two, you attending the question and you answering the question rightly. And always when you come across these questions, reading comprehension, sentence correction, many a student who would, even if you Google these questions, reading comprehension, sentence correction in general, it would always put you in doubt. Even I could give you a sample now, but that is for the rest, not with who has connected with Aptitude Buster. With this introduction, I like to take to the questions. I repeat the last point once again. If you wanna score well, if you wanna crack TCS Ninja 2022, the very first section is gonna be a tough and a challenging part, wherein you need to answer 24 questions correctly in 30 minutes time, which means an approximate time of 60 seconds to 60 to 70 seconds. If you're gonna make it, then it's gonna be a really, really challenging aspect. Now let's go to the questions. First, for each, let me introduce you to question types. Predominantly, I've chosen the three which are meant for TCS Ninja. We will be discussing questions on sentence correction first, and then depending on the time, we'll decide whether to go for the other question types. If time permits, we'll do it. Look at this question type. You can take a minute's time, or I would say any time between 45 to 60 seconds, and try to figure out an answer. First, how do you feel about it? Going by the condition, when you are given a question like this on sentence completion, do you really feel that you can answer it within a minute? You answer, there's no need for you to answer me because I do know what your mind voice is. This is gonna be really, really challenging. I wanna approach this question in two different ways. One is the usual way that you do it, another the Aptitude Busters way, so that you know the difference, how smart enough you have to be in order to crack TCS Ninja, because that is our main point. Let's start with the question. Because they had expected the spacecraft Voyager 2 to be able to gather data only about the planets Jupiter and Saturn, scientists were dashed the wealth of information it sent back from Neptune 12 years after leaving Earth. Now let me discuss with the usual way of approaching this question. The usual way of approach is you try to insert one choice after the other, and you try to find out a choice which you think that sounds fit, right? You would have tried it by now, I believe. Had you tried it, you would have been into trouble, because if you tried one choice or placing one choice after the other in the blank, you would feel that all the four choices to greater extent matches the blank. So that is an indication a competitive exam like TCS Ninja will really place you in a or put you to a tough task. Do not try to put it or do not try to place one question after the other. Certainly, it is very, very lethal in terms of your score. So don't try to plug in. What else you need to do? First, try to ascertain whether you can understand the meaning of the sentence. That's always a reliable clue for you to ascertain. Once you are on a sentence completion question, ensure whether you can understand the question. If you can understand the question, if you can understand the sense of it, if you could try to come to terms with the contextual meaning, then you can give the question an attempt. Otherwise, you can skip it. I believe while you look at this question is very, very simple. It talks about the expectations of the scientists, because they had expected the spacecraft Voyager 2 to be able to gather data only about the planets Jupiter and Saturn. Scientists were dashed with the information. So if you say that yes, this sentence talks about the scientists, and more precisely the expectations of the scientists on this spacecraft. So what are their expectations? Their expectations were that this spacecraft would gather data only. That's a clue. Their expectations is they thought this spacecraft would gather data only from Jupiter and Saturn. Okay, whereas what happened? Scientists were dashed the wealth of information sent back from Neptune 12 years after leaving Earth. So there is another clue, wealth of information. And if you want it to be point blank, it all depends to this particular clue. If you could zero down on this phrase, what wealth of information means, then you can very, very confident that you could narrow down on that choice, right? Okay, so the expectations were just about the planets on Jupiter and Saturn, whereas the spacecraft has sent information from Neptune, which means the context says the spacecraft has exceeded the expectations. Beyond Jupiter and Saturn, the spacecraft has exceeded expectations. So when you say, for example, let's say in the interview process itself, you clear the stage 1, you clear stage 2, and you're being called for personal interview, and when the interviewer asks you a question, how much is your expected salary? Let's assume in an interview situation, and you give an answer, well, I expect 3 lakhs per annum or 5 lakhs per annum, and he in turn says, well, our package starts with 6 lakhs per annum. How would you respond? You expected 3 to 5 lakhs, whereas the interview says our package starts from 6, which means the expectations, it means you can easily understand it's beyond expectations, it has exceeded the expectations. So when it goes beyond expectations, which would be the right option from the 4? Now you could be very sure the answer is option C for the question. Scientists were delighted by the wealth of information sent back from Neptune 12 years after leaving Earth. So if you answer it this way, if you get trained to answer this way, definitely you will feel for sure that your answer to the question is right. So keep this in your mind. You're not going to plug in, or you're not going to insert one choice after the other, right? Let's try. Second question. I'll give you 45 seconds time. when you look at this particular question and when you attempt to solve, I can say it for sure, you cannot get it in 45 seconds right away. If you are new to sentence comprehension question types, or if you're new to verbal aptitude training segment as such, if you say that this is the very first time I see these sort of questions, or I do not know this is how the questions would be for TCS Ninja, then I can say for sure, even if instead of 45 seconds, if I extend the time limit to 90 seconds, you still would find it very difficult to get the meaning or get closer to the answer choice for two reasons. First, you might struggle to understand the meaning of the given sentence here. And even if you get it, you wouldn't be very sure of the answer choices, right? If we feel so, you can leave the comments in the box. How many of you feel this difficulty? How many of you experience the difficulty which I said? Those who are finding it difficult to understand the sentence, and even if you understood, you're struggling to identify the right choice, or in other words, you feel that more than one choice would seem appropriate. Those who undergo this difficulty, those who experience the difficulty, can leave a comment in the comment box. Cool. I haven't come across any comment. Does it mean that you all have this difficulty? Let's presume so. Fine. Let's start with the first part, how we should try to understand the meaning of the given sentence. Although economists have traditionally considered the district to be solely an agricultural one, the dash of the inhabitants' occupations makes such a classification obsolete. So the first point which I tried to make, if you had difficulty in understanding the contextual meaning, perhaps it must be due to this word, the classification obsolete, because this is relatively belongs to a vocabulary range which we'd say which has less frequency and many wouldn't have noted it, right? Let's come to this particular part a bit later. Let's look at the first half of the sentence, because you have a comma here. Although economists have traditionally considered the district to be solely means what? The word solely, the sole player, sole contributor, the solely means only an agricultural one. So the sentence suggests that though economists have considered the district, or we could say a place, to be an agricultural one, the dash of the inhabitants' occupations makes such a classification obsolete, makes such a classification, what sort of classification revealed in the sentence here? Here it says they have already considered to be an agricultural one. So when he says make such a classification obsolete, the word obsolete means outdated. So the contextual meaning says that you can no longer call that particular place an agricultural place. Why so? Because inhabitants, occupations. So very easily you can make a guess, you can predict a word here. We can say there should be a word which should mean many or several or various. Since there are many occupations, you can no longer call this place an agricultural place. That's what the sentence means here. If you apply it on the answer choices, your prediction is many or several or it could be various occupations. Apply it on the answer choices, you can easily eliminate A. Option B, if you know the meaning, you could easily pick it. If you don't know the meaning, it gets reserved. Predictability doesn't mean various or many. Profitability also has another meaning and doesn't come closer to the idea that you have predicted or the idea that you have in your mind. Answer is option B. You can say it for sure that the answer for the question is option B, that is diversity. The word diversity means a plenty or many or various. Since each inhabitant of that particular place have different occupations, look at the word here. The question itself says this. Occupations makes such a classification obsolete. You can no longer call that place an agricultural place. So this is just an introduction for you to the question of sentence completion. I'll just take you to one more question type. Now look at this question. This question, I'll give you 1 minute time. First, try to find out what the question asked you to do. The moment you look at it, you can understand this is a sentence correction question. You are given a sentence. You're given a sentence and a part of the sentence is underlined, following which you have been given 4 options. Give it a look. I'll talk about it once again. Take 60 seconds to find the answer. Well, if you think that you need some more time, you can tell me, or we can go to the answer right away. First, when you're on this question, you try to absorb the various ways in which you need to approach this question. The question type called sentence correction, as I place it here, has several formats. I have chosen one that is very, very common. But when you prepare for exams like TCS Ninja, with this as a course structure, they would distort it in several ways. Say, for example, here you have been given one question, or here a question carries one sentence, of which the sentence, a part of the sentence is underlined here, And if you look closer, option A repeats the question itself. And you've been given 3 other options. So what does it mean? If you think the given sentence is error-free, you would choose option A as the answer. If you think the given sentence needs to be corrected, then you have to pick it from the other 3 choices. This is what the format says. This is one common format. I already told you that this format is likely to change in TCS Ninja. Instead of giving option A, they may give you B, C, D, and they may give you 3 other options, and the 4th option could be no error. So it can be framed like that as well. So whichever way that you get it, the approach to this question type is gonna be the same. You need to be very sure how to identify the answer for this question. Having said this, how will you go about it? What's the usual way of approaching this question? The usual way, you would start with reading the question. The mole is a nocturnal insectivorous mammal regarded as pests by gardeners because of their burrowing activities spoiling lawns and gardens. So you would try to make some idea about it. And here the problem is you cannot rely on any particular answer choice because any of these choices could be correct, which means when you get into answering all the 4 options, especially in a sentence correction question, it leads to more confusion. Unlike the other question types, sentence correction question alone is considered to be the most confusing one because you need to look at the question and usually you tend to look at the answer choices. While you tend to look at the answer choices, you would end up reading answer choice, all the answer, or you would end up reading each answer choice. If you get into the practice of reading each answer choice in detail, I can say for sure that it leaves you baffled. You would be completely blown away because all the 4 options, they would pick it in such a way that could be very, very closer and they may look similar. I repeat, the options would look similar. Look here, even if, say for example, if you are looking for some shortcuts and if you want to apply it, yes, there are possibilities, but provided you have to be very, very sure. Look here, regarded as pests, regarded to be pests, regarded as a pest, regarded as a pest. So you must have the patience to look for clues. Rather, if you get frustrated and if you end up reading each choice, you would feel that, let me omit this question, move on to the next question. That is the sort of frustration that this question type creates. Okay, so I already said this question type is one of a staple one. You could expect it in TCS Ninja. Thereby, time consumption is very, very important. I'll give you an easy clue for this question, and let me check whether when I give you a clue for this question, how far you could adapt it for the similar questions in the same question type, perhaps in the later sessions. The mole is a nocturnal insectivorous mammal. The mole is, we can say it for sure, the subject is singular here, the verb is also singular. We can say it for sure. So there are clues in the question. First, get those clues. The moment you arrive at the clues, very easily you can eliminate 2 answer choices. When we say that mole is a nocturnal insectivorous mammal, it should be regarded as a pest because the mole is. Everything has to be singular. You would have learned about agreement. The rule says when the subject is singular, the verb should be singular, or in here, in a larger sense, the predicate should be in singular form. So now you have very dependable, very, very reliable clue to eliminate options A and option B with just one knock. can eliminate 2 options right away. That is the power of Aptitude Buster tips and techniques, not only for this question type, and that's how it's going to be for the entire question types in verbal, as well as for the other sections in TCS Ninja, guys. With just 10 seconds, will help you to get closer to the answer choices. Okay, earlier you had 4 answer choices. Now with one knock, you have eliminated 2 choices. Now you're between C and D. Read it further. Here, the obvious clue has been presented. Both option C and option D says regarded as a pest, which means you need to read further and find for some other clues. Let's start with C here. The mole is a nocturnal insectivorous mammal regarded as a pest by gardeners because of burrowing activity spoiling lawns and gardens. Whenever you read it, sentence correction question, I haven't given you any other extra instruction here. Just by the way of my reading, you could understand. You would try to apply it with the choice and read it to get the complete sense. So when you read C, you would find it's very much ambiguous, or we call it's unclear or ambiguous. Keep it for a while. Let's read D. Let's examine option D and come back. Option D says the mole is a nocturnal insectivorous mammal regarded as a pest by gardeners because its burrowing activity spoils. Now, do we need the word? Do we need this pronoun here? It's. Ask yourself. Option C doesn't give you this pronoun, whereas option D presents you with this pronoun. You ask yourself which option makes it error-free. When you question yourself further, you will understand, since you started with the sentence, the mole is a nocturnal insectivorous mammal regarded as a pest by gardeners, we need the pronoun its, because the word its refers to the noun mole here. C gets eliminated. The right choice is option D. So what I want to point out here is we are not just gonna give you the answers or just want to trust you this is the right answer for questions, because we've been examining what are being presented in the media, what are being presented in the other channels. Mostly they are giving you the answer for the questions, but it won't help. The reason, you won't get the same questions, rather you will get the same question types. So for each question type, especially in a verbal question type, my first and foremost tip is this: when you answer a question, you must answer it confidently. Even out of 24 questions, you answer 18 to 20 questions correctly. Even if you skip 4 questions, rejecting as that you are doubtful, still it would get you a good mark rather than you answering all 24 questions. So as we said earlier, this is just an introduction, giving you a feel of how Aptitude Buster training is gonna be. And we will be ensuring you that once you enroll for the course, we'll deal with each of these question types in detail. Not only these question types, there are other ancillary question types for these 3: reading comprehension, sentence completion, and sentence correction. We'll completely cover all these question types. Not only in this, we will give you shortcut methods, time-saving techniques for each of these. So with this, I like to end this session. I'll give you 1 more minute time that if you have any doubts or comments, you can pass, and you can always rely on our YouTube channel and do download our mobile app. We will be going for full-fledged TCS Ninja specific module shortly, and all the sessions will be accessible for the subscribers who were subscribed. Okay. Now, if you have any doubts on these, you can leave it in the comments box. Take a minute's time, please. All right, guys, feel free to write to us, contact us, and we assure you that with Aptitude Buster's specific module by your side, you're gonna make it. You will clear TCS Ninja 2022. All the very best. Thank you.